Okay.
We'll now move on to the next presentation. So we're travelling almost equal distance from New Zealand to the other side of Australia, which is to Western Australia. And we'll be joined by Dr. Anita Lumbus, who's the Research and Development Officer of Wanslea. And I'll let Anita talk about it, but it is about a particular research project that was done. And I'll let, in partnership with Curtin University, Grandparents Rearing Grandchildren, West Australia, and Edith Cowan University. But I'll let Anita explain that further to you. So welcome, Anita.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. You can see that?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, great. Yes, thank you. My name's Anita Lumbus. I work in the Research and Evaluation Program at Wanslea. I'd like to begin firstly by acknowledging that I'm presenting here today on the land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge that this always was and will be Aboriginal land and its sovereignty was never ceded. So I'll be presenting today on a 3-year cross-institutional research project on the impact of grandparent carers raising, the impact of the caring role on grandparents raising their grandchildren in Western Australia. I'll be presenting on behalf of Wanslea, which is the agency, the lead agency managing the research. So I'll give an overview of what the research involved, the findings and call to action. So some background to the research. So Wanslea is a long-standing community service organisation, providing a range of services to families and children across Western Australia, the Northern Territory and Tasmania. At Wanslea, we are committed to creating long-term social change through our services and partnerships. We're the largest and leading provider of services to informal grandparent carers with full-time care of their grandchildren in Western Australia. Since 2002, we've provided support groups to grandparent carers across locations in metropolitan and rural Western Australia, as well as information, referral, training, occasional respite and advocacy. Since 2013, we've also been contracted by the WA government to administer the Grand Carers Support Scheme, which is a one-off annual payment to full-time informal grandparent carers to support them in the care of their grandchildren. In the Western Australian context, the formal carers are those who have authorised care of their children by care and protection orders registered with the WA Department of Communities, entitled to a subsidy and support from the department, and the grandparents with informal care have no legal arrangements in place for care. There's also a subgroup of grandparents who have family court appointed guardianship or custody of their grandchildren. Like informal grandparent carers, they do not receive the level of support offered to those who are formal carers. So there was a vital need for this research, including awareness of the growing number of grandparents entering caring arrangements. And as you may be aware, with grandparent care being the fastest growing form of out-of-home care for vulnerable children in Australia. Yet there's limited research on the experiences of grandparent carers, in particular informal grandparent carers, and no published research in the West Australian context. This is also important to note because there are differences in welfare and service provision across Australia, across Australian states and territories, and therefore grandparent carers in each jurisdiction will have a unique experience. Further, there's emerging evidence of improved outcomes for children placed in kinship care, including with grandparents. Grandparent carers play a critical role in providing full-time care for their grandchildren when it's no longer safe for them to be at home, keeping them out of foster care system. However, they are a hidden population, absent in research, service and government data, and they are largely not recognised within policy and service delivery frameworks. So the objectives of this research were to firstly understand the impact of the caring role on the mental, physical, social, and financial health of grandparent carers, to identify the gaps and opportunities in the service and policy systems they navigate, and to examine the shared and different experiences of formal and informal grandparent carers. And importantly, this research aimed to provide an evidence base to inform policy and service responses. So the research was funded through Lottery West, was overseen by a Grandcare Research Advisory and Working Group, including grandparent carers, members of Parliament, service providers. 2 universities were involved in undertaking the research. So we had Edith Cowan University, which conducted a survey with grandparent carers, multi-generational family matrices with grandparent carers from remote communities, remote Aboriginal communities in the Kimberley region, and an evaluation of leadership camps for grandchildren. Curtin University also undertook service and policy mapping with service stakeholders. Grandparents Rearing Grandchildren WA, which is a grassroots grandparent-led group providing support to grandparent carers, has been a key partner in the project, in particular in advocacy work. And of course, grandparent carers were at the centre of this research. So Wanslea was the lead agency, and we had a project team managing this research. So who were the grandparent carers who took part? So there were 622 grandparent carers. Of these, 70% of families have their grandmother as the primary or sole carer. 77% were aged 50 to 69 years old. Grandparents were raising on average 2.5 children, which is a larger family than the Australian average. Aboriginal grandparent carers care for 1 to 2 more grandchildren than their non-Aboriginal peers, an average of 3.5 children compared to 2.19. 77% are informal grandcarers. On average, their grandchildren had lived with them for 6.3 years. So moving on to what the key findings were from the research. Financial stress faced both formal and informal carers, and grandparent carers identified this as the most important issue facing them. The research found that the majority of carers are living below the poverty line, and a subset of these were living on less than $19,000 per year. 95% of carers surveyed said they did not have enough food left at the end of the week, and noting that grandparent carers are also raising larger sized families. Grandparent carers also had to make changes to employment and to housing arrangements. 20% received no financial support from family or government, and the family tax benefit was the most common source of financial support. Further, their grandchildren often have specialised needs due to experiences of trauma and the lack of financial resources impacts on grandparents being able to access specialised health and educational support that children need. As one grandparent carer said, "I enjoy being a grandparent, but it's really hard for me to pay my bills and living expenses. I need to have repairs to my car, but because of the difficulties of the house, I'm not able to do it." Another key issue was navigating systems. The research showed how there are very limited services targeted specifically to grandparent carers. Services do not collect data on grandparent carers. As a result, they are not recognised as a unique group, and service responses are not evidence informed. 3/4 of grandparents surveyed reported they consistently experience confusion in navigating systems when seeking support, and this is an additional stressor for them. Grandparent carers are not identified in the policy systems that directly impact on them, including child protection, health, education, income support, childcare, and housing. The grandparent carers reported experiencing fear and shame around accessing family tax benefit, with concerns that if they tried to access the family tax benefit, it may mean parents remove the child so as not to lose access to this money, putting the child's safety at risk. This highlights the importance of the family tax benefit following the child, which would reduce some of these risks. There's also the issue of inequitable access to services for informal carers. The formal status of grandparent carers appears to bring greater recognition from services, making them more visible and dividing a different response from those systems. Formal carers report services are significantly more helpful across financial, social, education, and practical support than informal carers. The top priority for grandparent carers was receiving the same financial support as foster carers, as well as Centrelink assistance. Legal aid assistance also ranked highly. There is little to no access to public legal services to ensure legal security or recognition of care arrangements for informal carers. And the complexity and inadequacy of services is reflected in the comment on one of the service providers who stated, I think what gets a little bit forgotten is grandparents actually know what they need. They just don't know how to access it. They know what they need to do to be okay and well with these kids. They just don't know how to access supports, whether that's money, whatever it is, but they don't know really. Aboriginal grandparent carers had particular experiences of service exclusion and financial hardship. Of those grandparent carers living on less than $19,000 a year, 80% identified as Aboriginal, while Aboriginal grandparent carers are overrepresented in the total number of grandparent-headed families. They are underrepresented in service delivery, and this has historical and contemporary roots in fear and distrust of child welfare authorities and the government. Aboriginal grandparent carers also frequently fall through the service gaps because their kinship naming system does not align with the dominant Western paradigm. Aboriginal grandparent carers reported better health and had higher average scores for emotional well-being and social functioning than non-Aboriginal grandparent carers. They report more help from their social and family networks. In Western Australia, an Aboriginal child is 18.1 times more likely to be in out-of-home care than a non-Aboriginal child. It is vital that Aboriginal grandparent carers have culturally safe, place-based services and access to income support to sustain kinship placements and to keep children safe in culture. And as one of the survey participants said, I adore my grandies. I thoroughly enjoy my time with them. I teach them about our Aboriginal culture and the importance of knowing who they are and where they fit within our families. To know culture is to accept identity. The research also looked at the health impact of the caring role. A self-reporting tool measuring health status was included in the survey for grandparent carers. A lower score reflects poorer health. The results of grandparent carers were compared to the general Australian population in the same age ranges. Across all grandparent carer groups, formal and informal, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, grandparent carers scored lower across all dimensions of health than their peers. Grandparent carers also support the health needs of their grandchildren, and all children who participated had at least one health condition, posing additional stresses for grandparent carers. More than 30% of children had a high needs mental health issue. One of the grandparent carers stated that I no longer have a life that matches my age. Grandparent carers support the needs of their grandchildren within the constraints of the structures and institutions that fail to recognise and support them. Grandparent carers were asked what they enjoyed most about being a grandparent carer. The most common source of joy was providing their grandchildren safety and security. Mutual love and joy and the close relationship and company were the other most common responses. One of the grandparents stated, my grandson thrives on hugs and kisses, and so do I. We love each other, and I think that is the key. Without wanting to sound melodramatic, here's the reason I get up in the morning, and I thank God for entrusting him to my care. The greatest worry for grandparent carers was the future of their grandchildren due to a grandparent carer's health or passing, as reflected in a quote by one of the grandparents who said, the least enjoyable thing is knowing that I'm getting older and worrying about their future if my health deteriorates, or that I may pass away before they are all able to care for themselves. Grandparent carers bring grandchildren into full-time care when it is no longer safe for them to be at home, bringing significant social and financial savings to government and the community. We know kinship care delivers better outcomes for kids than foster care. However, grandparents take on the role at great expense to their own health and well-being. Our research identified key solutions for a fairer future for grandchildren: a safe and regular income to assist in lifting families out of poverty and sustaining care arrangements. Caring for grandparent carers is caring for kids. Supporting grandparents supports the well-being of their children in their care. Grandparent carers need policy changes to address the inadequacy and complex barriers to accessing services and support. Service providers need to be culturally responsive and flexible to keep children safe in culture. Grandparent carers also need financial and material resources to respond to age-specific health requirements so they can continue to care for their grandchildren. And our call to action: we identified actions at the state government, federal government, service provider and broader community level. Firstly, and importantly, at the state government level, the state government can introduce a grandparent carer subsidy. This would be a regular, accessible and equitable means of financial support. Create a proof of care system to give access to universal and specialist state and Commonwealth government services and income support. Grandparent carers in key services, including the Department of Communities, Health and Education, and a specialist legal service with expertise in the family court, children's court, wills and superannuation. How can the Commonwealth Government help? Reform the family Centrelink procedures so family tax benefit follows the child. Ensure minimum required turnaround times for grandparent carers, for Centrelink claims. Remove all activity requirements also from income support payments for all grandparent carers. Create an evidence of care system which is compatible with state government systems. And include a census question to track changes in the number of grandparent-headed families over time. How can service providers help? Service providers by accessing the research evidence to understand the impact of the caring role on grandparents and the issues on intersecting needs of grandparent carers. Recognise them as a unique group with particular needs. Record grandparent-headed families in service data. Ensure referrals processes and the entry into services are clear and available in multiple formats. Public education to help the community to understand the role and needs of grandparent carers. The broader community, we can lobby state and federal members of parliament. And if you visit the Grandparents Rearing Grandchildren page, there is a campaign set up there and you can write to your letter to your MP. Volunteers are always needed to help support us in advocacy work. Include grandparent carers and grandchildren in school, social and community life. And importantly, I'd like to acknowledge the grandparent carers and the service provider participants for their time and contribution to this research, the grandparent carer research advisory and working groups. The vital work of the Wanslea project team, including Katie Bennell, Chrissy Easton, Denise Gray, and under the leadership of Dr. Katrina Stratton, the former Manager of Research and Evaluation at Wanslea, now a member of WA Parliament, and our research partners, Grandparents Rearing Grandchildren WA, ECU Curtin, and Lottery West. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. And we'll open up the line for any questions. And if you've got questions to enter in, they'd be very welcome. Just while we're waiting for those, Anita, I must say that you've provided some excellent suggestions, both in the key solutions and then what each of those various groups can do.
Yep.
And we'll make sure they're distributed to everyone. who's attending today and promote those. A question that I have for you is that after listening to Kate and Jill, are you jealous?
Oh, in New Zealand.
Yeah,
sorry, I
you're
came on
jealous
towards
of
the
what-
end of that. Yes, yeah, I caught the end of the presentation.
Yeah,
Yes.
they've
yes, and yeah.
yeah, they've certainly been able to
Support
do some of the
recognition.
things that are on your list. So
yes, that's right. Yeah.
have we got any questions come in?
Nothing so far. But I think we've probably had a lot to digest and a lot to reinforce from the comments that have been made throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly the census question, I think, is a recurring theme of having that data source to really drive a lot of these changes.
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, we'll be looking at some of those themes that have emerged, but I think you've certainly captured those in a lot of the points you've raised about the key solutions and then about the role of respective groups, including organisations themselves that are represented here today. There's things that they can do.
Yeah.
The other thing that's quite, and certainly that slide that's there about we'd be encouraging people to visit the website you've provided to people to join in this campaign. The other thing that certainly struck me was the analysis you did of the health issues that are facing grandparent carers in particular. So when they're in that carers role compared to other grandparents, and that's quite remarkable, I think.
Yes. Yeah. So across all domains there.
Yes. Incredible.
Yeah. And we know the link between poverty and health as well. So
yes, absolutely.
Now, we haven't got any other questions to come through at this stage, but if you do, for all the attendees, if you think of a question you'd like to ask Anita after this session, we'd be more than happy to pass that on, of course. Oh, we may have just had a question. Yes, we had a question just come through for you, Anita. So in your research, did you come across any grandparent carers, particularly from migrant families? And if so, was there any particular focus on that?
Edith Cowan University, who managed the grandparent survey, acknowledged that as one of the limitations of this, that there needs to be a greater involvement, representation of grandparent carers from refugee and migrant backgrounds. So it's a great question to ask.
Definitely one for us to consider in terms of who needs to be around the table to talk about some of these issues from a multicultural perspective.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, well, we'll leave it there and we'll have a short break for afternoon tea and then be resuming for the final two sessions at 2:10. So we'll look forward to everyone joining back in the conversation at that point. So thank you once again to Anita, and we'll stay in touch with you. And of course, your boss there too, who we have a close liaison with through the Child and Family Welfare Association. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.